Today, we just got done recording a podcast with one of the OGs of the original podcast, Theo Bowie, my friend here. Now we're gonna get into a training session. So Theo is somebody that I have been training with as somebody is like a training partner, somebody who is a colleague for almost like a decade now. It's kind of crazy to say that. It makes me feel like we've been in the game for a minute. But we're gonna get a session in. So today you're gonna see a push session. So we're on a push-pull leg split, which means this is my second push session of the week. So it is a higher volume, more of a hypertrophy based program. I'm eating in a surplus, I'm getting plenty of sleep. This is a high volume program that you need a lot of recovery from. So only copy this and use this if you are taking precautions and making sure that you are experienced and you have a good amount of recovery so you can handle this. But today is gonna be more bodybuilding like focused, starting with some incline bench and just a bunch of chest, shoulders, and triceps. Let's get into it. All right, so we're starting out with sets of 8. So anytime we're looking at a hypertrophy program, even though we might be going into sets of 10, 12, 15, even 20 sometimes, the compound lift, which is the incline bench press for us today, is gonna stay a little bit lower. So this week we have 8s. Typically what I will do is linearly progress that. So we might start with 10s and then 8s and then 6s and keep working up in load while dropping volume so we can focus on strength for the compound lift and then get into a double progression method, higher reps inside of the accessory and isolation work. So we're staying at an RIR of about 1 to 2 on this compound. That means reps in reserve, and I typically like to progress this as the weeks go on too. So last week my reps in reserve were actually 3, which meant I literally would leave 3 in the tank, and a lot of people don't understand how important it is to leave at least 1 or 2 reps in the tank. If you don't, you're going to failure. One, the benefit from a hypertrophy standpoint isn't that much greater, and it's not worth the systemic fatigue. So you're getting more fatigue by going to failure for this much gain. If we leave a couple in the tank, our form's better, the quality of reps better, the activation of the muscles better, and then we can come back and train again in a few days without the recovery issue being present. And that's just from saving a couple reps. So always try to stay in the 1 to 3 range for reps in reserve on most of your sets. All right, so now we're moving on to the dumbbell flat bench, so more pressing. I typically like to keep, when we're doing a focused workout like this for hypertrophy, we're only gonna do a couple exercises for the chest, a couple for the shoulders, and a couple for the triceps. When you start doing a million variations for a single muscle group, you're just overkill. Not only are you increasing fatigue, which lowers your performance and the quality of the work you're doing, which is why, again, we're staying in the 1 to 2 RIR at least throughout this process. But on top of that, you're actually reaching a point of diminishing returns with volume. And there's research that shows anything over 10 sets on a single muscle group in a single session starts to lower testosterone, muscle protein synthesis, things that are going to increase hypertrophy. So it's important to keep shit simple. All right, we are done with anything towards the chest. We are moving on to the shoulder. So right now we are going into a dumbbell seated military press. This is actually, in my opinion, one of the staple shoulder builders in general as far as a compound lift. Not everybody can do a barbell overhead press comfortably with good form. So a dumbbell seated military press is a really good way to target the delts, but actually keep it safe as well. And it still gives you that room to progress like a compound lift. So we're doing sets of 8 here. After we finish this, we are gonna move to lateral raises, and those will be sets of 15. So we're gonna start increasing the rep count, do a little bit more isolation stuff to finish out the day. So like the reason we're hanging from this is actually to angle the clavicle a little bit, and as he does a raise, leading with his elbow, it's gonna keep it more in here. You're still gonna get a little bit of trap activity, but if you can lean away from the cable and almost drag through your elbow rather than lifting up, because our body's thinking, which direction are we going? It's trying to go up. What happens to your scapula when you think up? You elevate, you shrug, you end up getting all trapped and they take over. But with this, it's almost like he's trying to drag it towards me, and he's got that angle to be more favorable and place more tension on the deltoid, so it's more of a shoulder movement versus a shrug. So with movements like this, the lateral raise or any isolation work, curls, extensions, things like that, I typically like to program and periodize in a double progression model. What this means is right now we're doing 12 to 15 reps. So I might do the same movement or style of lateral raise for 3, 4, or 5 weeks. What I'm trying to do is pick a weight that I can do 3 sets of 12, for example, with great form and execution. And then every week I'm trying to get closer to that higher end of the range, which would be 15. So for 12 to 15 reps, I might start with 40 pounds on the cable machine for 3 sets of 12 week 1, and then 13, 13, 12 week 2, and then 14, 13, 13 week 3. And eventually I'm getting to 3 sets of 15 at the same weight with great form that I had 3 sets of 12 with. And then I'll rotate the movement to a dumbbell lateral raise or something different. All right, so now we're moving on to the finishing aspects of the session, and we're just doing all tricep work. So typically the way I like to split up this kind of stuff, specifically arm training, and limb training, like isolation, like leg extensions, leg curls, bicep curls, tricep extensions, is going to be varying the joint angle when you are doing the movement. So for example, if you're doing bicep curls twice a week, one day of the week, you should have your shoulders in a neutral position and an extended position. Now you're getting the full stretch, now you're getting a neutral position, and then one day you should have your shoulders in a flexed position, meaning your elbows are in front of you. Those 3 different positionings put tension and resistance on the bicep in a different way. The same thing applies with tricep extensions. You should have one day where you're in front of yourself pushing down, and you should have one day where you're in a stretch position focusing on overhead, which is what we're doing right now with skull crushers and what we're doing next with tricep overhead extensions on the cable. And the same thing applies with leg extensions and lying leg curls. You should have a day where you're doing lying leg curls with your hips extended, like a lying leg curl, and then a day where you're in a seated position, like a seated leg curl. When you can vary the joint ankles, there's been research that shows hypertrophy is actually greater when we do that across the week. this session, as I was saying at the beginning, we basically pick 2 movements for each muscle group of the day. This is a push day, so we had 2 for chest, 2 for shoulders, 2 for triceps. We're 8 reps per set on the compound like lifts that we're trying to build strength in, and then about 12 to 15 on the isolation stuff that we're more focused on volume with. An interesting conversation Theo and I were having as we were training was the fact that if you don't train it, you essentially lose it, you will detrain it. And this is why in a lot of my programming inside the Tailored Trainer, we really focus on implementing a concurrent style of program design. And what that means is that you're focused on multiple modalities or goals in a single training week or microcycle. So you might have a hypertrophy focused day, but at the beginning of the day, you're working on a box jump or a short sprint or a dumbbell snatch, something explosive, because you don't want to lose that neurological capability in your pursuit of building muscle. So the lesson of that is simple. Don't completely untrain any one rep range or any one intensity, but rather blend them together with a smart program.